And we're live for another AustroThomism roundtable. How you guys doing tonight?
I'm fine.
Doing well, Caleb. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to have you all back on. Happy to do this. This is the 98th thing recorded on the channel. And so the 99th thing will be done Thursday, and Friday's a 100th episode stream. So that's going to be a lot of fun.
You're doing 24 consecutive hours, right? Is the plan?
12.
12. Yeah, let's
I'm going 7 to 7.
Yeah, okay. 12. 7 to 7. Okay, y'all probably be able to hop on then.
Awesome.
At some point.
Well,
unfortunately, I will not be there with you for 12 hours.
Good. All good, man. Yeah, I figured out how to stream video games, so I'm gonna stream some Bioshock, do some live readings, do the bookshelf tour. So it's gonna be a fun time.
Okay.
So, but that's not what we're here to talk about. We'll talk about the recent articles you all published. Bulgakov published an article, and AnarchoCatholic published an article. Connor's published more articles. We got Andrew working on an article. Like, y'all are just churning out articles, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to write. I need to stretch those muscles more.
I completely forgot to tweet the link out to people who want to watch. So let me just do that real quick.
It happens.
Yeah, you guys going to talk for a little bit about the articles you wrote and give people a heads up about what we're going to cover, kind of thing.
Well, okay, since mine's the first one, I guess I'll just briefly give what it's about. So I'm just exposing one of Peter Geach's, a Catholic analytic philosopher of the 20th century, one of his theses about good and evil, probably his central thesis about good and evil, but it's logically predicative and not attributive, or the other way around, actually. So I'll just explore that in a moment. What it means, I'll read it out so you'll understand what it is and what this thesis might have an impact on metaphysics and on other aspects of ethics. But that's about it for mine. It's very short and sweet in that respect.
Nice. What about you, AnarchoCatholic? What did you write?
Mine probably a little bit more long-winded, as I tend to be in writing. Mine actually started as a Twitter rant. Our mutual or a good friend of AustroThomism, Gold Guy or Bullion Boy 22. 22.
I think so.
Had some kind of really nice tweet as he's been moving more back into the faith, and some asshole atheist decided to accuse him of worshiping sky fairies or something stupid like that.
Was it Kevin? Was it Kevin Burns?
I don't remember who. Like, wasn't anyone that I was playing with previously?
It was a very random fedora guy. It wasn't someone I've ever seen before.
And so I started sort of interrogating about why he was so convinced about something he knew nothing about. Ends up posting some links to some very mediocre pop science articles claiming that they somehow disprove Thomistic scholastic metaphysics and proofs of the existence of God. And I sort of had to go off on him because I realized that he had, not only did the person writing the article completely mischaracterize the arguments, the person citing the article didn't understand any of the arguments being made. And he was therefore much more guilty of the kind of gullible mysticism that Christians are often accused of. And that thus inspired an article where I basically become convinced that a large portion of atheists are superstitious mystics, just of their own particular ilk.
This reminds. Does anybody here watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia? This is gonna tie in.
I've watched quite a bit of it. I need to actually watch it season to season.
AnarchoCatholic, what about you?
I'm familiar with the show. I have not seen a whole lot of it.
There's this scene where they're debating the merits of evolution.
Science is a liar sometimes.
Exactly. Science is a liar sometimes. And it's a wonderful scene. I'll send you a link to it later so you can check it out because it's absolutely hilarious and true. I'm going to find a way I might just incorporate that honestly into the intro. I might just plug that scene into it. The science
add it to the part of the
sometimes.
intro montage, yeah.
Exactly. Because it seems to be more and more accurate. People think science can't be wrong or something. When science is all about, changing and growing views on things. It's weird. But let's get into it. Let me just say a screen and we'll go with Bulgakov's article first.
And on just briefly, that's probably the topic of my next article is on the science TM, which it is fun. I'm basically kind of riffing off on something that Rothbard and Roger Scruton have written about in diverse places. Rothbard refers to scientism. Scruton said it's the same phenomenon in various forms. So Marx's ideology, Foucault's discourse, stuff like that just sort of reappears. And scientism, or the science TM, Dr. Fauci being the new vaccine pope, something like that, sort of exploring that concept.
Nice. I'm looking forward to that. Okay. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Shall I read from... Okay, I'll read from your screen so that I read as it goes along.
Okay.
So, in this article, I'd like to put forward a thesis that Peter Geach stated in his short paper, Good and Evil. By the way, before I continue, you can find this paper in Philippa Foot, Theories of Ethics. It's a collection of essays. You can also find in it a reply from utilitarian philosopher R.M. Hare, which, though I disagree with it, I found it useful for developing my thinking on this. So, borrowing terms from grammar, I'd like to make a distinction between something that is logically predicative and logically attributive. Logically predicative is an A-B, the phrase, logically splits into the two phrases is an A and is a B. Logically attributive is an A-B, the phrase, cannot be logically split. A few examples. The phrases X is a big flea and X is a small elephant are both attributive. If they were predicative, then we could say the big flea is a big animal and a small elephant is a small animal, leading us to conclude that a big flea is bigger than a small elephant. The phrase X is the possible father of Y does not break up into X is a father and X is possible. Those would both be incorrect conclusions to draw from the original phrase and even contradicted. Because if, for example, if I say X is a possible father of Y, I am most definitely not saying X is the father of Y. So it is a logically attributive phrase. It cannot be split. Logically, that is. X is a red book, however, is logically predicative. For it is correct for me to say that X is red and X is a book are both true based upon the original phrase. So, the good and evil thesis. Good and bad are always attributive. You cannot infer of a bad A which you could infer of an A. Take, for instance, bad food. Just because food supports life, you cannot infer that bad food also supports life. So bad is clearly attributive. This is not so obvious for the term good, for whatever holds true for A will, in almost all cases, hold true for a good A. But consider the phrases good car and red car. If my far-sighted but colorblind friend sees a car in the distance, and I, being more nearsighted, tell him that the distant object is red, we can conclude, by pooling together this information, that there is a red car. There is no possibility of ascertaining that a thing is a good car by combining independent information in this manner. Even when we use good and bad in a grammatically predicative way, there is still some substantive that must be understood. There is no such thing as being just good or bad. There is only being a good or bad so and so. A quick example, by what I mean grammatically predicative, is something is good, or when someone just says good in response to a situation, there is still something that must be inferred that is good. But Bulgakov, I hear you ask, what is the point of this distinction? What do we gain from this distinction? More than you might imagine. If this distinction is true, then the only way to be a good human, or to perform a good human act, is to fulfill certain requirements that only humans can. What does this give us? Nothing short of a secular reason to support the Catholic view of good, a fulfillment of being human, to be what you are, and to regard evil as a privation of being what you are, a privation of being itself. For if the only way to be a good man is to fulfill certain characteristics that only humans can, then to be evil is to be less human, to fail at being human, and to be good is to be more human, a success at being human. In fact, this distinction leads us right to teleology, the realm of final causality. If the only way for anything to be good is to be successful at what it essentially is, then that thing must have a telos, a purpose. This then suggests that humans and all other things have a purpose as part of their essence. I should say this is somewhat rough and ready, since there are accidental and substantial forms, and that informs a sort of a final causality that inheres in every object. It should be kept in mind that Geach's thesis, when not paired with a proper, i.e. scholastic ontology, leads to a sort of crude functionalism in regards to morality. For when we are left with the idea that things are only good by virtue of their definition, we settle on a form of nominalism. Geach's thesis is then interesting, but does not reveal much. That is the end of my article. You can develop this idea in many other ways. You can use it against utilitarianism if you want, to propose an alternate view of ethics that is directly against utilitarianism or other such views of ethics. You can use it in develop in other ways, I guess, if you want to focus more on the logical aspects of it. But I just wanted to present the thesis shortly.
I think it's so interesting at the end when you point out that Caleb, do you mind bringing up the article? Sorry, I should just have it in front of me. It's me being lazy.
Yeah.
But when you talk about without scholastic ontology, you sort of end up with the kind of functionalism, and that's something I've found interesting previously, is because it's especially when you're talking about what it means to be a good man or a good woman or an evil man or an evil woman. What sense does functionalism make? Is it's functional for whom? If you're trying to determine what, how do you decide what functions well for a man? As a man, how do you be a good man if being a good man means to be good for men?
That was indeed why I recommended reading R.M. Hare's essay critiquing good and evil. In fact, R.M. Hare was pushed to write the essay by Peter Geach himself, who kind of bullied him into it. But the thing is, R.M. Hare is a utilitarian and not a Catholic. Geach is a Catholic, very well versed in Aquinas, but he writes as an analytic, so he doesn't So in this article, he doesn't delve into religion or ontology. He's writing purely as an analytic. So he personally, the human Geach, does assume a scholastic ontology, but in the article he does not. And therein there's R.M. Hare's criticism of him that for this thesis to succeed, at least in the analytic way in which R.M. Hare operates, you sort of need to assume a pure functionalism for humans. And then a lot of very deleterious effects follow if you accept that.
It is above my head, so I'm going to let you just continue to talk about it. We're getting to the point now, we're getting much deeper into the philosophy stuff. I'm kind of like, I need to get my game up a bit here.
This is what happens when you give me and Bulgakov too many metaphysics books to read. As we start talking about it too much and start writing about it too much.
Definitely, we read them. I'm loving it. I need to. Is there an online course I can take on Metaphysics 101?
There might be somewhere. There has to be a good one somewhere. There has to be. Impossible.
So another thing I'm curious about a little bit, Bulgakov, because I know you've mentioned previously a lot of, I guess it's Camus. You are very fond of his work, and I'm curious sort of how this might be too loaded a question, but when you have like an absurdist or something like that trying to grapple with these things, trying to grapple with ontologies or essences or what the good is. Do you think is there any way to kind of reconcile an absurdist view with
Christianity
with an ontological good and evil?
There is, in a weird way, because absurdism is much more about about how you view things, not about the things themselves. Camus sort of gives an out for Christians in the Myth of Sisyphus, where he says there are absurd Christians. They're people who essentially hold to all the convictions, but they're amazed at their own convictions. The way I explain it is the good news of the Gospels are indeed really good news. Almost too good, almost like too good to really believe, because it's really insanely good. It's hard. It's you're called to the way of the cross, not easy street, but it's still really, really good news. And it's essentially this contrast between the world as you see it. You can see it as this as this fallen place, and the good news itself, which generates the absurd for the absurd Christian. Camus himself did have an essay that I still have yet to read, which was, I think, his doctoral thesis on Neoplatonism and early Christianity. You can find in Sartre and Camus quite an influence of Augustine in their philosophical anthropology. So he does have some reading of Augustine and a few of the early church fathers, and he was fairly well versed in the Gospels themselves.
Well, one of the things I find interesting about this, how to put this, I appreciate arguments or things that involve the how do I put this? I really like when words I can't think of what a phrase I'm just gonna say it. I like it when words mean things and people actually stick to those meanings of things. This is a dumb guy take, but no, I really nothing I hate more than when people just say a word and don't have any firm definition of what the word they're using is, and then people are kind of tricks along with linguistic tricks around the words. Like every time I get into debate on Twitter, I'm always told you're just arguing semantics. I know I'm trying to figure out what the fuck you're saying. Like I can't know what you're saying if you're gonna we're making the same mouth noise but using different languages. I have to know what these words mean to you before we get engaged in the conversation. And so I like the fact that this is making an argument basically, hey, you based on how these words are used, you have these problems. This is how I like how the argument uses that.
Yeah,
I think
the paper itself is only 10 pages long. I actually highly recommend you find the book Theories of Ethics, edition by Philippa Foote on LibGen. If you want, the PDF is on LibGen. I can also give it a link if anyone is curious. You can just hit me up. The paper's only 10 pages long, and he sort of he has a little jab at a few of the Oxford intuitionists who are a different school of ethical thought, who sort of I don't believe, maybe it was a moralist or the intuitionist. There was even the objectivists and not the Randian types. That was something else back at Oxford. But he sort of takes a jab at them because even Aristotle noticed this peculiar thing about the words good and evil, and the moralists say, oh, it's just a quirk of the Greek and English languages, and Geach sort of makes fun of us like, no, I think it's a quirk of something real that the languages point to, not just a coincidence that both English and Greek have this. It's actually a real distinction, not just a nominal one.
And also to Kale's point, I think that sort of when people don't want to define their terms, I think it's really interesting to me that something like good and evil, because when you hear like a scholastic definition of what the good is, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. And what else could it be? But so many people sort of like, and I remember, arguments I've had with people about beauty or about being or about the transcendentals, and they don't really have a good definition in their mind, but they want to reject the one that you give that seems to be the only one that could logically be true.
Yeah. Now, that's definitely a frustrating thing I've run into a bit, where people won't want to find a term and you're like, here's a definition that works, and they just instinctively won't accept any definition. Because at least people I debate, people I debate a lot, normally a lot of like Iowa neoliberal people, and so they know they're not supposed to agree with what I'm saying, so they just intrinsically disagree with it and then start trying to crack jokes about it. That's the only go-to. They all are arguing like Christopher Hitchens. We're like, well, we don't actually argue if we can just mock things.
Yeah, I mean, they have some like unclear idea in the back of their head that like they sort of maybe, but they haven't really thought about it enough to be able to, so that they have an idea of where they want to get to. They have the conclusion they want to reach, and if they're having to define things that's not going to get them there, they have to sort of abandon it. So it keeps them from trying to actually define their terms, though, because if they do, they know they don't. I don't think they actually know. I think they sort of implicitly or subconsciously realize it's not going to take them in a good direction.
Yeah. So artists talk of language, and probably why I've been reading. I've been trying to read Deleuze and the whole like post-structuralist stuff. I think that actually is interesting. Is interesting about how language works, which I think is interesting. But I don't think he's right. I think from at least from what I understand of what he's saying, I think Deleuze is wrong on stuff. But I think the whole post-structuralist argument about how language works and how we all define our terms so differently, we can't ever agree on what a truth would be, so it's unknowable. I think that it's a better argument than most people offer for how there is no what it's a truth. It's like, no, it's there, you just can't know it. I think that's a better argument. I'm more likely to accept, but probably won't.
Yeah, they remind me a bit of I don't know if it was early or later. Wittgenstein had this idea that on some things you cannot speak, so you must be silent. He didn't think truth was unknowable, at least not completely, but on some things. Some specific things is sort of content in this respect, that there is a noumena, something beyond the world of experience that we just can't say. But yeah, he might be a more fruitful read on philosophy of language, because I think scholastics can still make great use of him. Although you can probably make use of post-structuralists in like political and social analysis anyway. I know Bert Arcus certainly does.
I have done nothing but listen to Bert Arcus today. I downloaded like 15 podcasts. I have like Bert Arcus. I downloaded like his Pete, stuff his Wallow, his Timeline Earth stuff. I've been on a Bert Arcus.
He has two good interviews with Keith. There's one where he's talking about the Machiavellians by James Burnham, and there's another one where he's discussing post-anarchism with Keith. Both are pretty long. So if you just want something to listen to while you work, for like, I think one's like 3 hours, so or like 1 hour and a half or something like that.
Awesome. He's impressive. I'm definitely a fan.
He's a very, very smart guy.
Yeah. Anything else they want to add on Bulgakov's article? If we move on to the next one.
No, I think very well done, very well stated. I think it's a fantastic thesis, and I appreciate the contribution, because I need to start reading more Geach clearly, but
Same.
Yeah, it's
Geach
great.
is fun because he has a lot of rather short articles, and you can or you can read one of, I think it's 2 Stanton lectures. I know one of them is called The Virtues, which are probably my favorite I guess, I don't know, writing of his. It's the most consistent long form one, because it's all one continuous thing. Technically, everything else is just collections of articles on topics. So God and the Soul is him applying analytic philosophy to, like, what does resurrection mean? Was Lazarus ever really dead? Was he the same man before and after death? What does death mean? The immateriality of a soul, what does that mean for time? And so on and so forth. How does time work when you're dead? Or are people in purgatory right now? Or are they out of time, so we can't say they're in purgatory right now? And so on for like 400 pages. So it's several different problems tackled in that manner.
Sounds interesting.
Sounds dense, but sounds fascinating.
Yeah, he has a very good writing style, so he's never hard to follow. He's harder to follow in The Virtues, which is my favorite piece of his, because it's a transcription of a lecture. So there's, he sort of alludes to people very quickly, and then has a very quick rebuttal or comment, and then moves on. And he kind of goes all over the place because it's a lecture. But in his writing stuff, he's very, very concise, very to the point, very clear writer, and very enjoyable. So I can very much recommend all of his articles.
Awesome. Let me just say the screen for Ancat's article.
Mm-hmm.
We are still tagging people. We're still going to try to get Trinhorn to read this one. We're tagging him, and we're gonna get it. Because actually, the first article I read by Trinhorn was very similar to this one, and so that was interesting. Everybody see that? Because it's up here. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just getting caught up on the comments. I haven't been paying attention to them.
There's been some hilarious ones.
We have the worst trolls. Oh my goodness.
I'm loving it. I am like Dan Hepburn says gay. I'm like plot opinion disregarded.
If it hurts my feelings, it's not true.
Facts.
Okay. Yeah. So we ready?
Yep.
Okay, so I think I had this titled somewhere, "The Atheist and the Mystic," and as I mentioned, this started as first a brief Twitter argument, and then a bit of a rant. Natural theology has fascinated me since I discovered it over a decade ago. The realization that not only the existence of God, but also aspects of his nature were knowable and understandable through our experience of the physical world and the use of our reason was mind-altering, to say the least. I find it almost incomprehensible that it has been forgotten by the modern world and is largely ignored or dismissed, especially by faithful Christians. God, for many Christians, becomes entirely unknowable and inscrutable and resembles, in more ways than one, more common perceptions of Allah. Refusing to utilize our perception and our rational faculties to know the divine, many Christians would tell us that we must and should rely completely on faith. One wonders if many have forgotten part of the beauty of the incarnation, that we might know God in the flesh. When Ayn Rand, God, I bring her up a lot, takes religion to task, it is in particular for this blind faith devoid of the use of reason. If we cannot know God exists, but must rather believe him into our lives, how are we to decide in what kind of a God we should believe? If one were to answer the one written about in the book, the obvious retort is to ask, which book, and why that one above any other? The answer of, I have faith, rings circular and hollow, and Rand sees only hopeless gullibility and naivete of a people who blindly follow what they are told by the current high priest standing before them, or the dead one who preceded him. To this extent, one's faith exists entirely devoid of reason. To the extent one's faith exists entirely devoid of reason, it is hard to argue that she is incorrect. This is, of course, not the faith of the Catholic Church or of St. Thomas Aquinas, who contributed more to our understanding of the nature of God than probably any other mere man in history. As natural theology can teach us that God must exist, that he must be perfect and good and true and one, the work of our faith becomes something entirely different. No longer do we need to have the faith that the unmovable mover is, but rather we only need to have faith in him. If I understand through reason that he actively If I understand through reason that he actively holds an existence in every moment, the question is not whether he loves me, but why. And with this knowledge, faith can grow. We have a basis on which to recognize, respect, and trust authorities. We can ask whether they teach agrees with our understanding of reality and the divine. We can observe if an authority can expand our knowledge or address errors in their own thinking or that of others. Without this foundation in our reason, which is itself grounded in sense knowledge, our faith is just a superstition. It is gullibility and belief in mystical powers and incantations. No understanding, just a naive belief that we are right, and the hope that we can will away any nagging doubt in ourselves or others. Enter the atheist. Like Rand, he sneers at the gullibility and mysticism he observes in organized religion. He sees faith in God as a crutch for those mentally unequipped to deal with reality. He, unlike those backward mystics of the Dark Ages, has the advantage of the modern sciences. He knows antiquated ideas like causality have been completely refuted. Even something as monumental as the creation of the universe can be casually dismissed by the latest scientific discoveries. It came from nothing. And then we have a interesting read from an article in Forbes about how matter in the universe arises from nothing. As a brief spoiler, the article does not actually deal with how matter arises in nothing. It's kind of an interesting exploration of antimatter asymmetry with a kind of a clickbaity title. But, you know, our I'd say straw man atheist, but again, this is based on an actual conversation. He might have actually been a straw man, I'm not sure. Was enough to persuade him. Okay. And here we start to see where our poor atheist friend has begun to lose his way. I have it on good authority that modern physics is a fairly complicated subject. Many do not have the aptitude for it, and those that do need many years of study to grasp what was cutting edge half a century ago. The number of people who can appreciate the equations of modern particle physics, which is the subject of the above article, is vanishingly small. And even among this tiny cadre of physicists who can investigate these deep questions, there's a lack of consistency about what the equations even mean. And even where there is consensus, questions about ontology are largely forgotten in favor of empirical prediction. This is the scientism that I think Bulgakov was alluding to previously. Ask a physicist how it could be that something can come from nothing, given that if it has the power to create something, it, by definition, can't be nothing. And if you get a coherent answer at all, you'll probably hear something about how that's not a question physics can answer, or something about the quantum foam, or some other piece of incoherent technobabble. If you were extremely lucky, you might get the admission that they don't really mean nothing, but as something that they don't really understand all that well. Now we see something of the crux of the issue. Due to their proficiency with mathematics and the advances of hundreds of years of genius which have come before them, physicists can appreciate in an incomplete way some of the most fundamental truths of the physical world. These discoveries are then translated into popular science literature and eventually make their way in some distorted and simplified form into the mainstream. Where atheists can read about them, believe the conclusions uncritically, and then believe that he is enlightened, and then lacks enough self-awareness to call Christians gullible. Does he actually believe he knows or understands anything about physics? Surely, like so many others, he knows that physics is hard, but the smart scientist said so, or at least the science reporter for his publication of choice says that they do. And if they know it, and they told him it was true, then he must know it as well. The religious person at least recognizes their faith as such. They know there's a gap in their understanding, and that they are trusting an authority, be it divine or human. But our skeptical friend thinks he actually knows something. He doesn't recognize belief as belief. He thinks almost nonsensical truths have been revealed to him, and he now possesses deep wisdom. Why? I'm not going to attempt a Hans Gruber accent, but the meme speaks for itself. He read the article in Forbes. And now we see the incredible projection that has taken place. He does not know any physics. He does not really understand Newtonian mechanics, a 300-year-old discipline, but he is sure it has disproved the argument of the unmoved mover. He couldn't describe any of the predictions of special or general relativity, but he is convinced he knows it disproves the existence of causality. He couldn't tell you any of the experiments that led to the development of quantum mechanics, but he's read enough blog posts about it to think he is an expert on the many worlds interpretation. And anyone who thinks a cat can't be both fully alive and fully dead at the same time is stuck in outdated modes of thinking. He has so internalized his beliefs that he no longer recognizes them as such. He has submitted his thoughts so completely to the shaman which lead his tribe of skeptics that he is willing to discard even the evidence of his own senses. He wields the careful poetry of his priests use to try to explain their inscrutable equations as both sword and shield against those who would offer thorough critique. He mumbles the words and phrases he has heard used by those he blindly follows as if they were a magic spell. And then he rolls his eyes at the humble Christian who might admit that they don't know why they believe, but are adamant that they know they should.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible article. Absolutely.
Very, very good. Very well written too.
Yeah, I know several people. It describes that kind of person so well that I feel like you knew several people I deal with on a daily occasion. Like it's just like these people exist, and I deal with them a lot. And they're out there. So it's very accurate.
No, I had the smallest concern that it was a bit, like I said, it was a bit of a straw man, except that I know people like this as well. And to be fair, this is not descriptive of all atheists. Some are at least a little bit more thoughtful. At least
we're not talking about Graham Oppie here.
Yeah,
that is not who we're talking about.
Second greatest living atheists.
It's I guess the colloquial would be the Reddit atheist is who this would sort of attack most generally. But it's very common among people that think that I don't know, sort of this midwit class that thinks that they know something and they don't.
I have an example of that. It's like when I first started winning Aquinas, my friend was like in high school. My friend was dual enrolling, so he was doing like college classes into the high school classes. And I mentioned Aquinas' 5 ways. He was, I learned that in my humanities class. Yeah, the professor proved them all wrong. And I was like, wow, this like humanities professor at a community college in the middle of Florida disproved the entire Catholic Church's best philosopher. What's his book? What's his book? What's his lecture? What's his name? What can I find him? Do you have a peace prize or something? Oh, he's just an overweight guy. It was a van.
Like, we thought Martin Luther had hubris, right?
And I asked, he's like, well, I can tell you what I'm wrong. I'm like, describe the first argument.
And the guy didn't edit his own Bible, at least.
Like this guy can't even describe the first argument. He's like, well, I don't need to know the false. I'm like, okay, you do you, dog. I'm not gonna.
Should actually.
I'm not gonna engage. I'm not gonna engage with that one.
Like the reason I think astrology is false is because I know the claims of astrology, and I think those claims are false.
Well, we're gonna have to have Grant on.
Don't understand it and think it's false.
We're gonna have to get Grant on for an astrology episode now.
Oh man, I mean, I'm actually perfectly willing to concede astrology as just a random topic that came to my head.
It'd be a fun one. But no, this is a really great article. Like it describes so many people, and it brings up a point that this is my use a lot, is that the people who don't actually know the science, but just quote the people who claim to know the science, are using just as much faith as I'm using when I quote Bible or I quote Aquinas or I quote this church. Like we're both using faith in all religious institutions as for arguments. And
I don't actually think Geach. I wrote about this. I think in the article called "Comments on the Virtue of Faith." But Geach he sort of thinks that actually faith. An argument from faith can be non-circular in certain circumstances, because, for example, if there's a guy doing mountain hiking and he's alone, and at night for some reason he gets trapped, he realized he's stuck, and he calls out for help without knowing anyone is there. Well, he kind of has faith that maybe someone will come and help him because he realized that he can't get out alone. Another example that Geach gives us is let's imagine you're in prison. And you receive a letter from someone saying they're willing to help you if you follow certain instructions. And you don't know this person. You have no real reason to suppose that this person might get you out. But you have nothing to lose. And it's... and, you've been in prison for a lot. That prison is all you know. And those instructions seem to do good by you. So it's a matter of faith in those two situations. But it is not irrational faith. It doesn't prove anything. It doesn't prove that the person outside the prison does want to help you or even exists in the first place, and it's not just a prank, or that there is someone willing to help you in the forest at night. But it's not an irrational response to the current situation one finds oneself in.
I like that. It makes sense.
That is excellent. And to the point I raised in the article, like you are knowingly making a leap of faith. Like if you're following the instructions of the prisoners, following those instructions, they have to sit there and say, okay, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to have faith that it might. And this internalized faith, and I think it's something you see a lot, is people don't really, in a lot of cases, understand what it is that they know and what it is they believe. And like the case of Caleb's friend who heard from their professor, he thinks he knows some philosophy, even though he can't because he heard someone told him something, and he decided that it was true, even though he can't recreate the argument for himself. He thinks he knows something. He doesn't realize that he's making a leap of faith.
Yeah, this is actually one of the reasons why Camus prefers a lot of the modern Christian philosophers, modern for his time, so Kierkegaard, stuff like that, over the atheists, people like Sartre and others, because Kierkegaard very explicitly makes a leap of faith. He has an entire book about it called Either Or, which is probably his most famous book, while everyone else, he says, also makes a leap of faith, but they don't admit it. And so they're even more wrong. They're not honest about their leap of faith.
Yeah, the atheist who argues like this or behaves these kind of attitudes, it reminds me a lot of like the blue-pilled neoliberal or blue-pilled Republican. As anyone who's blue-pilled in general, just trusted institutions as a whole and just using them as the basis for their arguments. It seems to be a correlation between the atheist. There seems to be a correlation between like the atheist who argues like that and the liberal who argues the same way.
Yeah, and I think to a large degree, it's people that sort of outsource their thinking to a large extent. Is if someone else can tell you what you should think or what's true or what's false, whether it's this fact pattern is true, this drug will help you, this institution is there for your own good, or this is the way that reality exists and the things that you should believe. It's a understandable but very, very sort of lazy blue-pilled approach to life. So I think there's probably a good bit of overlap. Even there's sort of it's obviously a more liberal bent, but like I mentioned, like I think Christians can sort of fall prey to this in the other extreme, where they realize more that they're taking something on faith, but they
faith
want
alone,
to leave it at
you
that.
could say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, like there are some really smart. I know it's people who are like really smart, like high IQ, high paying jobs, really smart people, but they never think for themselves. And their mind is, well, I'm smart and he's smart, and if he's a smart person and he says this, and that's what smart people are saying, so that's what I'm supposed to think. And it's this weird, like smart guy, like like the dumb. What's the syndrome of the IQ thing, where it's like. The IQ bell curve, and it's like, well, smart people think I'm smart, so I have to think that too. And it's this weird, like, hive mind effect.
Well, I think there's probably a pretty good Austrian economics argument to be made in terms of incentives. Is there's certainly a lot of rewards for, in a lot of cases, not thinking for yourself. Like if you can just sort of outsource your opinions and you can just sort of hive mind what you should think about things. There's a lot of security in that. There's a lot of extra energy that you're not investing in those sorts of things. So I think very much culturally we're set up with that kind of incentive structure where there's outside of the sort of nice fulfillment and being a good person in the truest sense, being the best person you can be in terms of expanding your knowledge and your thoughts. There's a lot of incentive towards not having to think, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's a very real specialization argument that, not everyone can be a Dominican friar sitting in cloistered writing about ontology, and maybe we should outsource, a lot of our thinking to people like Aristotle and Aquinas and then analyze what they say, but most of us are not going to come up with the original ideas. We simply don't have the time to specialize to that extent, and there's a physiological cost to spending however long just thinking about things and not, procuring food or securing the well-being of our offspring or whatever, or, protecting our family or whatever other needs might arise.
I will say, like, I think as a culture, we probably undervalue how good it is to be able to, obviously, like you said, it's not everyone can go and be Aquinas or Aristotle to discover these things, but a lot of people, or the vast majority of people, I think, can put in the effort to try and understand their arguments in some detail, and the human value to that, like the good that is for you, is something that is drastically undervalued.
Yeah.
You talk about the sort of creature comforts of, okay, you need to make sure you have enough to eat, you need to make sure you have shelter. But then the church is obviously very clear on this. Those things are at the service of your spiritual ends. You have a higher telos than just having enough to eat.
Yeah. Man does not live by bread alone.
Yes.
Forget where that comes back from, but it just popped up in my mind.
It's on that point. Like, it's a frustrating thing. I have like the idea that philosophy is not masculine or something. That they did like the peak masculinity is just the farmhand who doesn't read books and just works in the field all day.
You should only be allowed to do philosophy after a wrestling match, the old Greek way of doing it.
Like, what? There's an argument, but I don't think your bench press is high enough to argue with me today.
Interesting argument. Let's sit on the ring.
See, that's how we go. Return. We must return.
I think this is sort of the crux of American Revolution versus French Revolution, right? Is the American Revolution you had a bunch of farmers that were doing philosophy, and in France you didn't.
Ben Franklin was apparently really jacked. He was one of the first real bodybuilders. I mean, he swam every day. He really did try to like go for essentially an aesthetic build. It doesn't show up in the old portraits of old Ben Franklin, but apparently he really, really went for it.
Wow. Did not know that about him.
Right-wing bodybuilders are just baked into America's culture.
Yes, I love it. I got you guys keep talking. I got like a tap box. We got people commenting again.
Mm-hmm. Wait, we keep talking while you look at the comments?
Yeah, you guys keep talking. I gotta like these tap boxes.
What were we talking about then? Like about tribe, something like that, like a specialization.
Yeah, so I guess it'd be the Austrian argument for the incentive structure around what
also
we think and why
developing the virtue of wisdom, essentially, and which is what philosophy should be ideally about. It is called it is the Greek it's a composite word for love of wisdom, and that is what philosophy is and should be fostering in people. It's trying to develop one of your intellectual virtues. I think Mahitan calls it speculative virtues that want to know and to participate in the knowing of being itself. I think that's how Mahitan describes it. He describes it very, very beautifully. You do need to be, Mahitan's a tough read. I also highly recommend Art Scholasticism. I'm currently going through that, but his language is sometimes tough. But if you just kind of march on through it, you'll grasp most of the important stuff, especially if you're already used to scholastic terminology. If you're used to scholastic terminology, he will make a lot more sense. If not, you just kind of have to slog your way through it because it's going to be tough. Yeah. But if you've been reading 500 pages of Phaser in the last month, suddenly things are way easier. I don't know how.
Eventually, we have to cover degrees of knowledge. We have to eventually.
Isn't that like his biggest book or something?
That'll be a good one. We need to work up to that though. Like Phaser's sort of pushing everyone's limits at this point.
Let's go with Art and Scholasticism maybe first. Because I think you don't need to read all that book, because that book that's like 2 essays in one. It's like Art and Scholasticism and something else, because the original essay is not that big. It's like 100 and something pages, but it's not enough to fill out a book, so they added another one.
We're just gonna be bringing up obscure, like we're getting like esoteric and bringing up the most obscure people, like Jacques Maritain, Peter Geertz, Eric von Knut-Leden. These are names like even in our circles, and people know who Rothbard and Mises and Hopper are, which is already obscure. We'll go even deeper than here. I'm going even more obscure.
Geertz is a funny thing because he's known to analytics and scholastic. So Phaser will cite him, and Scruton will cite him. Scruton cites him whenever he's talking about morals and ethics. Really, he cites him in sexual desire, and Phaser cited him in 5 Proofs. Cambridge Properties of God is actually an idea developed by Phaser, and how change can happen in the world with God without God changing. It's actually an idea developed by Phaser in God and the Soul. So Geertz is actually famous in a few very tight circles, but Anscombe is like his wife, also a Catholic, who both Catholic converts, married in their early 20s, had 7 kids. She's way more famous because of her intentionality book on intentionality and other topics that were, centrally of discussion. Whereas most philosophers of the 20th century do not care about God's Cambridge properties. That's just weird scholastics like Phaser and Mahitan who care about that. Like everyone else outside of like Dominican friars and like 5 guys in like Oxford Theology School do not care about God and the soul or what resurrection really is, or so on and so forth. They care about intentionality, mental states, theory of mind, discussions on utilitarianism, which was really a very popular philosophy.
He makes an argument in Syrian history that scholastic natural law led to the problems of scholastic natural law led to the fruition of a proper moral philosophy that is utilitarianism.
Mm-hmm.
It's very. I'm hearing this. I'm like, it's not often that I disagree with Mises on something.
But when you do, it's a real big one.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm
trying to get to it.
Yeah, it's a very weird thought. I'm actually curious where he got it from, because the scholastics do have disagreements beyond between them. Scotus is not Aquinas, which is not Occam. And Abelard is not Aquinas too. Neither, and the earlier you go before Aquinas, the less Aristotelian influence there is, more Neoplatonic. But I'm actually curious where he got it from, because maybe from the way certain people phrase certain things and so forth, this can actually happen. Like Mahayton's, I think, very easy to understand if you're not familiar with the terminology from a fairly good exposition of it, like Phaser would. So if your first exposition is to not even your first, but your continuous exposition to stuff like that, is someone who writing like Mahayton, which is very flowery and assumes familiarity with his language and terms, it can sort of lead you to the wrong path of thinking what it is. Or maybe he just read like a really bad like modern commentaries on it from socialists. That might also have been what made it happen.
Yeah, I'm gonna blame anti-Catholic bias like usual. It's some dirty Protestant lies at some point.
Okay, he probably picked it up secondhand and was trying to understand some socialist argument, and he made an offhand remark, and he just picked it up secondhand.
Actually, we technically may not be able to sort of pass it off to Protestants, because was he in Austria or Germany? Those were Catholic, right? In the early 20th century.
He has a good point.
He came to America. We're gonna blame it on that.
He read widely. We can also actually he became way softer on religion after he came to America, but but his bias against natural law might have been from America. He became way softer on Christianity specifically, but bias against Catholicism might have been from the American friends. Yeah. That is true.
You go from socialism to human action, and you can just see the difference in how he views religion.
Yes, he's very anti-church. Yeah. Well, he's not ridiculously so. You can still read it without going ugh, but it's a bit tiring, but it's fine. You can just go through it.
Yeah, he's definitely someone everyone needs to be reading, especially Grant. Grant needs to get economics pilled. You gotta get him reading Austrians.
We just need to give him like Bastiat. No, what he needs is either Bastiat or what the government's done to our money, just to sort of get him a nice easy start.
Just Seen and Unseen. Seen and Unseen is a great read.
Yeah,
it's a good one. Yeah, he does know. We had a long Twitter thread talking about it. It was honestly hilarious. I recommend people go read those threads, because that was a very funny one. But no, it's gonna happen eventually. I told him like the process has begun. He's gonna get economic pilled. He has no say in the matter.
Didn't he say it's like useless to know or something like that? Because it's not, it doesn't make a difference to being. And I would like to remind Grant that he has a podcast where he has told everyone that he likes debating useless shit, such as whether Korean sweets are desserts or not. So he doesn't get to use this excuse. You have a podcast. You have a weekly podcast, friend. We know what you say and think and do.
He goes on Slip Gang. He can't complain about wasting time on anything.
Yeah, you cannot complain about waste of time.
Dude, anybody listen to his last? Anybody here listen to Slip Gang? His last episode, he went on Slip.
Yet. I want to.
He went on last episode of Slip Gang, and I found out apparently there's a odd collective in California making hard seltzers with the water base is holy water.
What? What is it? Okay, this is my Brazilian upbringing show. What is a hard seltzer?
A hard seltzer
alcoholic
drink.
Okay.
They're making alcoholic drinks to use holy water.
Is it Catholic holy water? Is it like real holy water, i.e. Catholic, or is it fake, i.e. Protestant?
There's apparently a video of a guy blessing, and I haven't seen the video, but apparently there's a video of a guy like over a vat, like praying over it, then turning into holy water.
Is he a Jesuit? That still counts, but it's understandable.
But apparently, if you go to that website, apparently the ad is like "Get crunk with Jesus."
If crunk was Jesus, is
it's terrible. But the funny thing about it is that if you go to the website, then it's an alcoholic website, so it says, "Are you over the age of 21?" And if you click yes, I'm over the age of 21, it takes you to the shopping page where you can order it, to find out more about that kind of stuff. If you click no, it hyperlinks you to a VeggieTales compilation.
Okay, fair enough.
Perfect.
Doing the good work. You get
I
to
can't be
see
mad.
VeggieTales.
I can't be too mad. Like if people under 21 being hyperlinked to VeggieTales, I can't complain too much about that. That's pretty good.
I assume does VeggieTales have a Protestant bias? I assume so, but I didn't
I've
grow up
never
with it
noticed
for
any.
obvious
It's
reasons.
very base. It's very basics. It's very this Bible story is being told.
I'm going to be honest, as a foreigner online, when I found out, I knew VeggieTales was a thing just because I would see it in the meme every now and then, and I wouldn't get it. Then when I found out it's a Bible Christian preaching show to kids using vegetables to tell, like, I don't know, Bible stories or something like that, that really sent my mind for a loop right there. That is not what I expected that show to be.
The whole story behind it is hilarious. Like the guy was gonna use candy bars and like chocolate, but his mom was like, "You're gonna make kids fat," so he made it vegetables. And then
That's amazing.
they had a very
that's awesome.
like they had a very early on advancement. Like they learned how to make the anesthesia when to make the cheeks like puff up and stuff. And no one else knew how to do it, so Pixar literally had to get a hold of the VeggieTales guys who were walking out of the garage. Like, hey, how'd you do that? So VeggieTales helped Pixar with animation.
That's also pretty good.
Yeah, they're crazy. This VeggieTales lore, the deep lore of VeggieTales is insane, and it's also like top tier comedy. They are absolutely hilarious. Their parodies of Lord of the Rings called Lord of the Bean is just stellar. It's incredible.
I love the. I don't know why the idea of their like Twitter page every now and then with Bible quotes are just like a little vegetable with eyes and a mouth. It's some of the funniest thing to me. I don't know why. It's very wholesome. It's very heartwarming, but it's also really, really funny. It should not be that funny.
No, but it's oh man, they're great. I for a while. I think I still have almost all of them on DVD. Like when they dropped, my mom would go to Christian bookstore and like buy the next one. So we had all of them on DVD.
Mm-hmm.
The fun those and Hanna-Barbera's stories from the Bible. Those are like the top tier kids cartoons.
Hanna-Barbera is like Flintstones, stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah,
I am familiar with the style. I did manage to get a few Flintstones and like the Future Family stuff when I was a kid.
Nice.
It's very, very little stuff like that. I would always occasionally on TV.
Honestly, it's weird how many there's a lot of weird like Bible Man or Angel Wars. There's a lot of weird like kids Christian cartoon that are like ridiculously good for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm still convinced that Bioman, there's some kind of Mandela effect with Bioman, that I grew up in a universe and like a part of the metaverse where Bioman did not exist. And as soon as I got on Twitter, everyone pretends he's real. I'm like, or it's like the Berenstain Bears or something like that. Like, we're from different worlds. I'm still not convinced it actually existed.
I just assume it's a weird American thing.
We
have our own weird Brazilian things, but Bible Man is not one of them.
Like Bible Man went from being like a cheap like Batman 60s, like 60s Batman knockoff with very cheesy stuff, and then they went to a weird transition when it like hit like the early 2000s, they had to go edgy, and so it opened up with like Bible Man's like away on vacation, and Cypher, his sidekick, is taking on Nazis who are trying to burn Bibles. It's just like, wait, what is this? The costume used to be like very cheap, like green paint, and now he's taking on the personification of Lion itself with a red lightsaber. What is happening?
It's phase 4 of the MCU.
Like, the Bible Man memes are hilarious though, because it's like Bible Man's this meme like Bible Man defeats all atheists by killing them.
Yeah, there's a lot of like Bible Man, very extremist Christians.
I love it. It's.
I wonder if it's a weird American Protestant culture trying to reach out to the youth that does this.
It is.
I don't see majority Catholic countries going that way or doing this.
It's the saving grace of Protestantism. I'm gonna tweet that. The saving grace of Protestantism is Bible Man.
I genuinely wonder if it's because there's so many denominations in the United States that no one has the upper hand. They're forced by the spirit of capitalism, as Max Weber would say, to compete within themselves to just produce the best entertainment for children. And so you end up with that. Whereas if Catholics rule, well, you have a monopoly, and we all know monopoly reduces the quality of any service.
We apply like Austrian economics to the production of Christian cartoons. I love this podcast. I love love this.
It wouldn't be AustroThomism if we didn't think about these things.
Oh, this is
The good thing about the Protestant Reformation is competition for children's entertainment. That's what I can say.
I'm gonna write that article tonight. Like reasons why the Protestant Reformation was good. It brought forth VeggieTales and posted a bunch of VeggieTales.
I'm imagining a situation analogous to Book of Job, where tradcasts, much like Job, complained to all the things that happened to him, and God responded with, "Where were you when I laid the foundations of the world?" I imagine modern tradcasts complaining about the Protestant Reformation and God just pointing to VeggieTales and Bible Man or something like that as justification. I have brought a greater good out of evil, and so I have permitted. Yeah, it's basically the problem of evil. I've permitted evil to bring out a greater good. Love it.
the ontological, like the telos of the Protestant Reformation was the production of VeggieTales. I love it.
Now that VeggieTales is here.
Was...
Now that VeggieTales is here, we can end it. We pack it in, guys. You can go back. You can go back to Catholic Church.
You've done it. You've achieved your goals. Come back into the fold.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're all welcome back now. This is a long time coming, a long project, but it's okay. Welcome back.
What's it? Okay, guys, we've almost gone for an hour. Let's give the plugs because now
we're not going higher than that. There's no way there's anything we can say better than that. We have indeed peaked. All right. Well, my ad is what you see on the screen. I'm ad available username Bulgakov's Behemoth. I write for AustroThomism. I just read my newest article, working on a new one on the science and subversion. I hope to have that out sometime soon. You might have to take a rain check on that one. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Nowhere else currently.
I'm at AnarchoCatholic on Twitter, AnarchoCatholic.substack.com. Also a writer for AustroThomism. Read my latest article. I'm working on one right now. It's going to be more focused on culture. Hopefully get it drafted done this week. Hopefully get it up in the next couple of weeks. I'm trying to move pretty quickly since I got some time for the summer. Yeah, that's me. Just, I don't know if he's going to know it. I want to plug Caleb. This is episode 98 on your channel or something like that.
Yes, sir.
You're looking at hitting the big 100 on Friday. So I want to make sure everyone knows that they should absolutely tune in and celebrate with Caleb for an impressive run so far. And here's to another 100 in short order.
Tired. I'm done. Man.
You're done. Yeah.
Yeah. Get to 100. Yeah. Like
dude,
the
12-hour live stream.
Finish VeggieTales.
Great. I'm going to be laughing about the rest of the night, just thinking about VeggieTales and the Reformation.
We'll know the Reformation's over when VeggieTales deletes their Twitter account. That's when we'll know. The Counter-Reformation will have won at last.
There's I don't know where it's like a fist. Not a fist. It says a Fist of VeggieTales Twitter account, I think, and they just tweet out VeggieTales memes that are like very they more extreme scripture verses with the VeggieTales faces.
Mm-hmm.
And they go
very it's all the stuff from Leviticus about homosexuality.
They go very fire and brimstone style, but with like Bob Tomato, and it's amazing. My name's Caleb. I'm on Twitter at Caleb509. I won't be on for June. I'm not going to be a part of Pride Month. I'm not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I will. Yeah. I will be having fun, hopefully, or else I'll go into despair and leave like Caleb. But I hope it's the former and not the latter.
I'm safe. I put the lamb. My cat won't get taken down. I put the blood over the doorway. I put the gay flag on the profile. I'm safe.
the war
will pass over you.
Yeah. Dude, that tweet. I fucking love that tweet. It was hashtag Pride Month. Hashtag respect fags. I love it.
Respect fags.
We
He's referring to the British way of saying cigarettes. Indeed, I respect Marlboro fags.
Absolutely. Well, guys, this has been fun. Like the Kaiwa on the bottom says, go follow AustroThomism on Twitter. Have a good night.